Dark clouds hung low over the city, casting an eerie gray hue over streets filled with abandoned cars, shattered glass, and the decaying remains of civilization. The air carried the foul stench of death, and the only sounds were the distant groans of the undead and the occasional crackle of fire still smoldering in the ruins. Daniel Carter crouched behind an overturned bus, his breath steady but controlled. His firefighter instincts had kept him alive this long, assessing danger, planning escape routes, and knowing when to fight and when to run. The city he once called home was now a graveyard, a hunting ground for the dead. A soft rustling in the alley behind him made him grip his crowbar tighter. He turned sharply, muscles tensed, only to see a woman emerging from the shadows. Emily Shaw. He had met her 2 days ago when he saved her from a collapsing building overrun with zombies. Unlike many survivors he had encountered, she was different, calm, resourceful, and driven by something beyond just staying alive. "We need to keep moving," she whispered, pulling her backpack straps tighter. "This place will be crawling with them soon." Daniel nodded, casting a glance down the main road. "We should take the East Bridge. Less likely to run into scavengers." Emily hesitated before responding. "No. The East Bridge collapsed last night. I saw it from the rooftop. Our best bet is cutting through the subway." Daniel frowned. The subway was a death trap. Narrow tunnels, limited visibility, and nowhere to escape if things went south. But Emily was right, staying out in the open meant risking an ambush from either the dead or the living. A sudden scream echoed from a few blocks away, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Emily stiffened. "More survivors?" "Or bait," Daniel said grimly. He had seen this tactic before. Some groups would wound someone and leave them to scream, drawing zombies in while they looted the area. "We need to go. Now." They moved swiftly, weaving through the ruins, stepping over bodies that had long since stopped moving. But just as they reached the entrance to the subway station, Emily stopped in her tracks. A little girl stood in the middle of the street, no older than 7. Her clothes were torn, her blonde hair tangled, and her face streaked with dirt and tears. Daniel cursed under his breath. It was never easy seeing children in this nightmare, and it was even harder making the decision that came next. "Emily," he said in a warning tone. But Emily was already moving toward the girl. "Hey, sweetie," she said softly, kneeling to her level. "Where are your parents?" The girl sniffled, pointing toward a wrecked diner across the street. "Daddy told me to hide, but he never came back." Daniel clenched his jaw. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. It was too open. Too dangerous. And yet, he couldn't just leave the girl. A low growl made his blood run cold. Emerging from the diner was a figure, tall, ragged, and moving with unnatural, jerky movements. Its eyes, once human, were now sunken pits of hunger. And behind it, more emerged. "Shit. We have to go, now." Emily scooped up the girl just as the first zombie lunged. Daniel swung his crowbar, the sickening crunch of bone and flesh echoing in the dead streets. More were coming. "Subway. Go," he shouted. They ran, the little girl clinging to Emily as the dead gave chase. The subway entrance was dark, foreboding, but they had no choice. They plunged down the stairs, into the suffocating shadows, as the growls above grew louder. The world had fallen. But for now, survival was all that mattered. The air in the subway was thick with dust and the stale scent of decay. Darkness swallowed everything beyond the weak glow of Daniel's flashlight. Every footstep echoed off the damp, cracked tiles, amplifying the silence that surrounded them. Emily clutched the little girl tightly, whispering soothing words as she whimpered against her chest. "She's scared," Emily murmured, glancing at Daniel. "We all are," he replied, gripping his crowbar tightly. He didn't like being underground, especially not in an enclosed space with only one way out. But they had no choice. The streets were death. A distant sound made them both freeze. A slow, dragging noise. Then another. Daniel swung his flashlight toward the source. Shadows shifted in the far tunnel. Movement. "Stay quiet," he whispered, motioning for Emily to keep low. They crept forward cautiously, every step measured. The subway had once been filled with people rushing to work, laughing with friends, glued to their phones. Now it was nothing but a graveyard. Then, a whisper. Not a growl. Not a zombie. A voice. Daniel stopped. He raised a hand, signaling Emily to wait. He listened closely, heartbeat pounding in his ears. The voice was low, urgent. Someone was speaking. Daniel moved toward the sound, peeking around the corner. Two figures crouched behind a pile of debris, one man and a young girl, no older than 10. The man had a rifle slung over his back and a desperate look in his eyes. His clothes were torn, his skin bruised. The girl, clinging to his arm, looked just as frightened as the one Emily carried. Daniel slowly stepped forward. "We're not here to hurt you." The man jolted, pulling the rifle off his back in an instant. "Stay back," he hissed. Emily raised her hands. "We have a child, too. We're just trying to get out of here alive." The man hesitated, eyes darting between them. Then, after a long pause, he lowered the weapon slightly. "My name's Greg," he muttered. "And this is Lena." He nodded toward the girl at his side. "We've been hiding down here for 2 days." Daniel frowned. "Why?" "The dead don't usually come underground unless they're following something." Greg's expression darkened. "They're here now." A chill crawled down Daniel's spine. Emily shifted, adjusting the little girl in her arms. "We can't stay here. We need to find a way out." Greg hesitated before speaking. "There's a way. I know a place, safe from the dead. From everything." Emily's eyes narrowed. "A safe zone?" Greg nodded. "A group of survivors, military, maybe, set up a stronghold in the mountains. Supposedly, they've got walls, weapons, even food." Daniel exchanged a look with Emily. They had heard rumors before. Safe zones that turned out to be death traps, outposts that had already been overrun. But the thought of something real, somewhere they could actually survive, was hard to ignore. "Where?" Daniel asked. "North. About 3 days' travel." Emily frowned. "Then why are you still here?" Greg exhaled sharply. "Because the warlord's men are blocking the way out of the city." Daniel's grip tightened on his crowbar. He had heard about the warlord, Yarrick Kane. A former soldier turned ruthless leader, controlling whatever was left of the city's resources. He and his gang of killers were just as dangerous as the zombies, maybe even worse. "If they catch us, we won't make it out alive," Greg said. A distant screech echoed through the tunnels. The conversation ended instantly. Daniel turned toward the sound. Shadows shifted again. More movement. More of them. "We need to go. Now." Greg nodded. "Follow me." They moved swiftly through the tunnels, weaving between abandoned subway cars and broken escalators. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with the scent of rot. Then they saw it. A mass of bodies, shuffling in the darkness. Some missing limbs, others crawling on the ground, their guttural moans filling the tunnel. Their eyes glowed faintly in the reflection of Daniel's flashlight. A horde. Greg cursed under his breath. They must have been drawn down here by the noise earlier. Daniel assessed the situation quickly. There was only one way past them, through an emergency exit leading to a maintenance tunnel. This way, Greg said, pulling open the rusted metal door. It groaned loudly. The zombies turned. Move! Daniel hissed. They rushed inside, sprinting down the narrow passage as the dead swarmed behind them. The sound of their clawing hands against metal sent shivers down Daniel's spine. Greg reached a ladder leading to a hatch above. This leads outside, he said, lifting Lena up first. Emily handed him the little girl she had been carrying before climbing up herself. Daniel went last. Just as he grabbed the ladder, the first zombie reached the doorway, its rotting face snarling as it lunged forward. Daniel yanked himself up just in time, slamming the hatch shut behind him. They emerged into the cold night air. The city skyline loomed in the distance, its buildings broken and lifeless. Greg caught his breath. We head north, he said, pointing toward the dark horizon. If we want a chance at survival, that's our only hope. Daniel looked at Emily. She nodded. No more running. No more hiding. If there was a real safe zone, they would find it. But first, they had to survive the journey. The night air was bitterly cold as Daniel, Emily, Greg, and the two young girls pressed forward, their breath visible in the dim moonlight. The city behind them was nothing but a skeletal ruin, a graveyard of lost lives and shattered dreams. Greg led the way, keeping low as they navigated through the crumbling outskirts. We need to stay off the main roads, he whispered. Jarek's men patrol this area. Daniel glanced at Emily, who was clutching the little girl tightly. The child hadn't spoken much since they rescued her, her eyes wide with fear. Lena, Greg's daughter, kept close to her father, occasionally stealing glances at the darkened ruins around them. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on all of them, but there was no time to rest. They moved through an abandoned residential area, the houses eerily silent. Broken windows, doors left ajar, and the occasional rotting corpse told the story of those who had tried, and failed, to survive. As they neared an old gas station, Greg held up a hand. Wait. Daniel tensed, gripping his crowbar. Greg crouched beside a pile of debris, scanning the area. I know a place nearby where we can rest for a few hours. It's an old warehouse. Should be safe. Daniel hesitated. Nowhere was truly safe anymore. Emily sighed. We need the rest, Daniel. Especially the girls. He finally nodded. All right. But only for a few hours. Greg led them through a narrow alley until they reached a rusted metal door. He pulled out a small knife, wedging it into the lock until it clicked open. The door creaked as he pushed it inward, revealing a dimly lit storage area filled with dusty crates and scattered supplies. We'll be safe here for now, Greg said, shutting the door behind them. Emily gently set the little girl down on an old blanket she found in the corner. You're okay now, she murmured, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. Daniel took a seat against the wall, keeping his crowbar within reach. He turned to Greg. You said Jarek's men are blocking the way out of the city. How many are we talking about? Greg exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Too many. They have snipers, roadblocks, and guards patrolling in shifts. They control the last major bridge out of here. Daniel frowned. Then how do we get past them? Greg hesitated. I have a way. Daniel narrowed his eyes. What way? Greg avoided his gaze, shifting uncomfortably. Before Daniel could press further, a sudden bang echoed through the warehouse. Everyone froze. Daniel was on his feet in an instant, crowbar raised. Emily pulled the girls close, her eyes darting around the room. Footsteps. Then, a voice. Well, look what we have here. Daniel's blood ran cold. A group of men stepped into view, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. They were armed, machetes, rifles, and makeshift armor. The symbol on their jackets sent a chill down his spine. Jarek's men. Daniel turned to Greg, realization hitting him like a punch to the gut. You sold us out. Greg's face was pale, guilt written all over it. I didn't have a choice, he muttered. They were going to kill Lena. Daniel's fists clenched. You son of a... Before he could move, one of Jarek's men struck him across the face with the butt of his rifle. Pain exploded in his skull as he collapsed to the ground. Emily screamed, but another man grabbed her, shoving her against the wall. The leader of the group, a tall man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, crouched beside Daniel. You've been causing quite a stir, he sneered. Jarek doesn't like troublemakers. Daniel glared at him. Go to hell. The man laughed, standing up. Oh, you're coming with us. Jarek wants to meet you personally. Daniel's stomach twisted. Jarek was known for making examples out of survivors who crossed him. Torture. Execution. Worse. The man turned to Greg. Good job, traitor. Greg's face was a mask of regret. He looked at Lena, then at Emily, who was shaking with rage. I didn't have a choice, he whispered again. Daniel struggled against the men holding him. We always have a choice. Scarface smirked. Enough talking. Let's go. The last thing Daniel saw before a rifle butt crashed into his skull was Emily's terrified face and the sound of the little girl screaming. Then, everything went dark. A dull, throbbing pain pounded in Daniel's skull as he slowly regained consciousness. His head felt heavy, his vision blurred. The scent of damp earth and rust filled his nostrils. Groaning, he tried to move, but his wrists were bound behind his back, the rough texture of a thick rope cutting into his skin. His legs were similarly restrained. The dim glow of firelight flickered across the cracked concrete walls. He was inside what looked like an old parking garage, one of Jarek Kane's hideouts. Emily. The kids. Panic surged through him. His eyes darted around, searching for them. Emily was nearby, tied to a rusted metal pole. She was awake, eyes burning with fury. Across from her, the two girls huddled together, terrified but unharmed. Greg was there too, sitting separately, his head hanging low. His betrayal had saved Lena's life, but it had doomed them all. Heavy footsteps echoed through the space. Then, a voice, low, commanding, laced with amusement. Well, the troublemakers are finally awake. Daniel turned his head and saw him. Jarek Kane. The infamous warlord stood before them, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark eyes filled with cold calculation. His face was marked with old battle scars, and a heavy revolver rested on his hip. So, Jarek said, crouching in front of Daniel. You thought you could sneak through my city, take what's mine, and leave? Daniel's jaw tightened. We're just trying to survive. Jarek chuckled. Aren't we all? He glanced at Emily, then at the girls. His smirk widened. A family, how touching. Daniel pulled against his restraints, anger surging through his veins. If you touch them. Jarek held up a hand. Relax. I don't kill women and children. Then, his smile faded. But you? You're a problem. He stood and turned to Greg, who flinched under his gaze. You did what I asked, Greg, Jarek said, voice eerily calm. You led them right to us. But tell me, do you think that erases your debt? Greg swallowed hard. I did what you wanted. I gave them to you. Just let me and Lena go. Jarek sighed. See, that's the problem. If I let you go, what kind of message does that send? That betraying your own people gets you freedom? He shook his head. I can't have that. Then, In one swift motion, Yarrick pulled his revolver and fired. The gunshot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Greg slumped forward, a single bullet hole in his skull. Lena screamed. Emily gasped. Daniel felt a mix of horror and rage, his body trembling against the restraints. Yarrick holstered his gun. That's how the world works now. Betrayal gets you nowhere. He turned back to Daniel. Now, you. I could kill you right now. Daniel stared defiantly at him. Then do it. Yarrick chuckled. Oh no, that would be too easy. He motioned to his men. Take him to the pit. Two of Yarrick's thugs grabbed Daniel and dragged him toward the back of the garage. Emily shouted, struggling against her restraints. Daniel. Daniel fought back, kicking and thrashing, but the men were too strong. They yanked open a heavy metal door, revealing a deep, dark pit, an old elevator shaft with jagged metal and debris at the bottom. Then, the stench hit him. Rot. Decay. Death. At the bottom of the pit, zombies stirred. It was a feeding pit. Daniel's blood ran cold. Yarrick grinned. You think you're a survivor? Let's see how long you last. The men shoved Daniel forward. He stumbled, barely managing to catch the edge before tumbling in. His fingers scraped against the rough concrete. Below, the undead groaned, their decomposing hands reaching for him. Yarrick knelt beside him. Here's the deal, hero. You survive until morning? Maybe I'll consider letting your little family go. Then, with a smirk, Yarrick kicked Daniel's hand. Daniel lost his grip. He fell. For a split second, time slowed. The world blurred as the darkness swallowed him whole. Then, impact. Pain shot through his body as he crashed onto a pile of corpses. He gasped, the wind knocked from his lungs. Above, Yarrick and his men laughed as they shut the door, sealing him in. The growls around him grew louder. The zombies were waking up. Daniel gritted his teeth, rolling off the bodies as the first one lunged at him. He barely dodged, his bound hands making movement difficult. He needed to think. Fast. His heart pounded as he spotted a broken pipe jutting from the wall. Scrambling to his feet, he ran toward it just as a zombie lunged. Rip. The rope tore against the sharp metal. His hands were free. Another zombie attacked. Daniel dodged, grabbing a jagged piece of rebar. He swung, the makeshift weapon slamming into its skull. Another came at him, then another. He fought, sweat and blood mixing as he tore through the horde. His body ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he would not die here. Not while Emily and the girls needed him. Finally, as the last zombie fell, Daniel staggered, exhaustion threatening to pull him under. Then, his eyes landed on a rusted maintenance ladder. Hope. Summoning the last of his strength, he climbed. Yarrick thought this was his grave. But Daniel wasn't done fighting yet. He was getting out. And when he did, Yarrick Kane was a dead man. Daniel's arms burned with exhaustion as he climbed the rusted ladder, every muscle in his body screaming for relief. The stench of rotting flesh still clung to his clothes, the blood of the undead smeared across his face. He had barely survived the pit. But he wasn't out yet. As he neared the top of the shaft, he slowed his movements, listening carefully. Voices. Yarrick's men were still nearby. Gritting his teeth, Daniel pressed his back against the cold metal and peered over the edge. Two guards stood at the entrance, their rifles slung over their shoulders. They were talking, laughing, completely unaware of the hell that had just unfolded below them. Perfect. Summoning the last of his strength, Daniel launched himself over the edge, landing behind the first guard. Before the man could react, Daniel grabbed him by the throat and slammed his head into the concrete wall. The sickening crack of bone breaking filled the air. The second guard turned, eyes wide. Daniel was faster. He ripped the rifle from the dying man's hands and swung it like a club, smashing it into the other guard's skull. Blood sprayed, and the man crumpled to the ground without a sound. Silence. Daniel stood there, panting, his heart pounding in his chest. Yarrick thought he was dead. Now, it was time to change the game. Meanwhile, Emily sat against the cold concrete wall, her hands still bound, her mind racing. Jarek's men had dragged her and the two girls to a different section of the hideout, a storage room filled with crates of supplies, weapons, and stolen goods. The flickering light overhead buzzed ominously, casting eerie shadows across the room. Lena clung to the younger girl, whispering words of comfort. Emily's wrists ached from the ropes. She had been trying to loosen them for hours, twisting her hands, rubbing the bindings against the rough metal pole behind her. She needed to get free. She needed to fight. The door creaked open, and Yarrick stepped inside. Emily glared at him, hatred burning in her eyes. Yarrick smirked. Still full of fire, I see. He knelt down in front of her, his expression smug. Your friend didn't last long. Shame. He had potential. Emily didn't flinch. You're a coward. Yarrick chuckled. Survival isn't about bravery, sweetheart. It's about power. And right now? I have all of it. Emily clenched her fists. For now. Jarek's smirk faltered for just a moment. Then, gunshots. Muffled, distant, but unmistakable. Jarek's head snapped toward the door. Emily felt a surge of hope. Daniel. Yarrick scowled. Stay here. He turned to his men. Watch them. Then, he stormed out of the room. As soon as the door slammed shut, Emily whispered, Lena, come here. The young girl hesitated, but then quickly crawled over. Emily turned her back to her. There's a knife in my boot. Can you grab it? Lena's small fingers fumbled, but after a moment, she pulled out the blade. Good girl, Emily whispered. Now, cut the ropes. The girl's hands were shaky, but she sawed through the bindings with determination. Then, snap. Emily was free. She wasted no time. She grabbed the knife, cutting the girl's restraints before snatching up a crowbar from a nearby crate. The guard by the door hadn't even noticed. He was too busy listening to the chaos outside. Emily moved. The crowbar came down hard, slamming into the back of the man's skull. He dropped instantly. Breathless, Emily turned to the girls. Stay close to me. She grabbed the guard's pistol and crept toward the door. Daniel was alive. And it was time to end this. Back in the compound. Daniel moved like a ghost through the hallways, picking off Jarek's men one by one. His stolen rifle was nearly empty, but that didn't matter. He had knives, a crowbar, and most importantly, rage. He had almost lost everything tonight. Not anymore. As he reached the central corridor, he spotted Yarrick barking orders to his remaining men. Daniel took a deep breath, raised his rifle, and fired. The first bullet struck one of Jarek's enforcers in the chest. The second took out another. Panic erupted. Yarrick spun around, his eyes widening in disbelief. Daniel stepped into the light, his face smeared with blood and dirt, his grip steady on the rifle. Surprised? Daniel growled. Jarek's shock quickly turned to anger. You should be dead. Daniel smirked. You first. Then, the fight began. Jarek's men opened fire, bullets whizzing past as Daniel dove behind cover. He returned fire, dropping another thug before sprinting toward the next hallway. Yarrick cursed. After him. Kill him. As his men gave chase, the storage room door burst open. Emily. She fired, taking down 2 guards. Daniel saw her across the room, their eyes locking for a split second. They were together again. Yarrick realized he was losing control. His empire was falling apart. Snarling, he grabbed a shotgun and made a break for the back exit. Daniel saw him. "Oh, no you don't." He sprinted after him, rage propelling him forward. Yarrick pushed open a rusted door, stepping into the open air of the city ruins. Daniel was right behind him. The final showdown was about to begin. The cold night air hit Daniel like a slap as he burst through the rusted door, his pulse hammering in his ears. Yarrick was ahead, sprinting through the rubble-strewn alleyway, shotgun clenched in his hands. His long coat flapped behind him as he dodged past abandoned cars and piles of debris. Daniel didn't hesitate. He chased. His body screamed in protest, every muscle aching, exhaustion clawing at his limbs, but he would not stop. Yarrick Kane had taken too much. Betrayed too many. And tonight, it ended. Gunfire rang out as Yarrick spun, firing a wild shot. The blast shattered a nearby car window, but Daniel kept moving, diving behind an overturned dumpster. Yarrick growled. "You're like a damn cockroach." Daniel gritted his teeth. "You should have made sure I was dead." He popped up, fired a shot. The bullet clipped Yarrick's shoulder. Yarrick stumbled with a grunt, but kept running, vanishing into the ruins of an old gas station. Daniel followed. Inside, the station was dark, shelves knocked over, broken glass crunching under his boots. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and rot. Somewhere in the shadows, Yarrick waited. Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle, stepping cautiously. "You're running out of places to hide, Yarrick." A chuckle echoed through the station. "I don't hide," Yarrick sneered. "I hunt." Then, movement. Daniel spun just as Yarrick lunged from behind a shelf, swinging the shotgun like a club. The impact sent Daniel crashing into a display rack. Pain exploded in his ribs as metal shelves collapsed around him. Yarrick didn't stop. He grabbed Daniel by the collar, yanked him up, and threw him against the counter. Daniel gasped as air rushed from his lungs. Yarrick loomed over him, eyes burning with fury. "You ruined everything." He raised the shotgun, aiming directly at Daniel's head. Boom! A gunshot rang out. Yarrick staggered, a bullet ripping through his leg. His shotgun clattered to the floor. Daniel's eyes snapped toward the entrance, Emily. She stood in the doorway, pistol raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Yarrick gritted his teeth, clutching his bleeding leg. "You little..." Daniel didn't let him finish. Summoning every ounce of strength left, he grabbed a broken piece of shelving and swung. The metal crashed into Yarrick's face. Blood sprayed. He hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Daniel staggered to his feet, panting. Emily rushed to his side, eyes scanning him for injuries. "Are you okay?" Daniel nodded. "I am now." They turned to Yarrick. The once feared warlord was on his knees, blood dripping from his nose and mouth, his body trembling. He had lost. Daniel walked forward, standing over him. Yarrick chuckled weakly, shaking his head. "You think killing me changes anything?" Daniel leveled his rifle. "No. But it makes the world a little better." Yarrick smirked. "Then do it." Daniel's finger hovered over the trigger. Then, a sound. A deep, guttural growl. Daniel's blood ran cold. Zombies. Dozens of them. Drawn by the gunfire, the undead shambled from the ruins outside, their sunken eyes glowing with hunger. Their numbers were overwhelming. Yarrick looked past Daniel, his face twisting in horror. "Shit." Emily grabbed Daniel's arm. "We have to go, now." Yarek, wounded and bleeding, tried to crawl away. The first zombie reached him. He screamed. Daniel and Emily turned and ran. Behind them, the undead swarmed Yarek, his shrieks turning into gurgled cries as they tore into him. Daniel didn't look back. They sprinted through the ruins, dodging the growing horde. Ahead, the gas station's back door was still open, their way out. They burst through, slamming it shut behind them. Outside, the streets were eerily empty. Emily panted. "The girls, we have to get back to them." Daniel nodded. "Let's move." They disappeared into the night, leaving the chaos behind. Yarek Kane was dead. But their fight for survival was far from over. Daniel and Emily moved through the ruined city like shadows, their breaths heavy, their bodies aching. The sound of Jarek's agonized scream still echoed in Daniel's mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. The dead were everywhere. They had barely escaped the gas station before the horde consumed it. Now, they had only one priority: getting back to the girls. Lena and the younger girl, Sophie, were waiting in the hideout. Alone. Daniel pushed forward, rifle clutched tightly, scanning every street and alley. No movement. But the silence was unnerving. "Something feels wrong," Emily whispered. Daniel nodded. "Too quiet." As they rounded the final corner, their hideout came into view. The doors were open. Daniel's heart dropped. He broke into a sprint, Emily right behind him. They rushed inside, and froze. The room was ransacked. Crates overturned. Blood smeared across the walls. No bodies. No signs of a struggle. Just emptiness. Emily's hands trembled. "No." Daniel clenched his jaw, scanning the room for any clue. A part of him had feared this. Jarek's death wouldn't erase the dangers of this world. But he had hoped, prayed, that for once, things would go their way. Emily's voice cracked. "Where are they?" Daniel spotted something, a small piece of torn cloth, caught on a rusty nail near the back entrance. Lena's. He knelt, touching the fabric. It was fresh. They were alive. Then, he noticed the footprints in the dust, multiple sets. "Someone took them," Daniel muttered. Emily swallowed hard. "Who?" A distant horn blared through the night. Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing. "I think we're about to find out." Meanwhile, Lena clutched Sophie tightly, her heart hammering in her chest. The truck's metal walls rattled as they sped across the cracked highway, the smell of oil and sweat thick in the air. Around them, men with rifles whispered among themselves. Their faces were hidden behind cloth masks, their eyes cold and calculating. They weren't Jarek's men. They were someone worse. Lena had heard the stories. A new group had been rising in the ruins, a faction that didn't just survive the apocalypse, they thrived in it. They didn't scavenge. They took. And now, they had her. Sophie whimpered. "I want Emily." Lena squeezed her hand. "We'll see her soon." She hoped she wasn't lying. The truck suddenly skidded to a stop, dust swirling in the headlights. A voice called out. "Bring them in." Lena swallowed hard as the doors swung open. A fortress loomed ahead, barbed wire fences, guard towers, and floodlights cutting through the darkness. A stronghold. And they were prisoners. Back to Daniel and Emily. They stood on a rooftop, looking out at the compound. It was larger than Jarek's hideout. More fortified. Emily's stomach twisted. "Who the hell are they?" Daniel exhaled sharply. "New players. More dangerous than Yarek ever was." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "We have to get them out." Daniel nodded. "Agreed." But this wasn't like Jarek's camp. This wasn't a gang of scavengers. This was an army. They needed a plan. And they needed it fast. The night air was thick with tension as Daniel and Emily crouched on the rooftop, staring down at the heavily fortified compound. Spotlights cut through the darkness, sweeping over the high walls lined with barbed wire. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their rifles glinting under the artificial light. Inside, Lena and Sophie were being held, prisoners of a new, more dangerous faction. Daniel clenched his jaw. This won't be like Jarek's hideout. These people are organized. Emily's grip tightened on her pistol. Then we'd better be smart. Daniel scanned the compound, mind racing. A direct attack would be suicide. They needed to find a weakness. Then, he saw it, a truck approaching the main gate, loaded with supplies. An opportunity. He turned to Emily. We get in with that truck. She hesitated, then nodded. It's risky. Daniel smirked. When is it not? Inside the compound. Lena and Sophie sat huddled in a dimly lit room, their wrists bound with rough rope. The air smelled of sweat, oil, and something far worse, desperation. A tall man with cold, calculating eyes entered. His presence sent a chill down Lena's spine. He knelt beside her. You're lucky we found you before the infected did. His voice was eerily calm. Lena glared at him. Let us go. He chuckled. Letting people go isn't how we survive. You'll work. You'll earn your place. Or you won't. Sophie whimpered. Lena pulled her close, heart pounding. The man stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you begin. The door slammed shut. Lena swallowed hard. She had to escape. Daniel and Emily. The supply truck rumbled forward, approaching the gate. Daniel and Emily crouched inside, hidden beneath stacks of crates. The vehicle slowed, voices outside exchanging brief words. Then, the gate creaked open. They were in. As the truck rolled inside, Daniel signaled to Emily. They moved quickly, slipping out the back while the guards were distracted. Sticking to the shadows, they made their way through the compound, scanning the area. Emily whispered, "Where do we start?" Daniel pointed to a row of makeshift holding cells. There. They pressed forward, ducking behind debris, avoiding patrols. Every second mattered. Finally, they reached the cells. Daniel peered through the bars, Lena and Sophie. Lena's eyes widened. Daniel? Shoo, he whispered. We're getting you out. Emily worked quickly, using a stolen knife to cut the ropes binding Lena and Sophie. Suddenly, a shout. A guard had spotted them. Stop right there. No time. Daniel moved. He tackled the guard, slamming him into the wall. The man struggled, reaching for his weapon, but Daniel was faster. A quick, brutal punch sent the guard crumpling. More shouts erupted from the camp. The alarm had been raised. We have to go. Emily hissed. Lena grabbed Sophie's hand, fear flashing in her eyes. Which way? Daniel scanned the area, an old watchtower, its ladder rusted but still intact. Up there. They ran, boots pounding against the dirt. The first shots rang out, bullets whizzing past. Guards were coming from all sides. Daniel fired back, dropping one, then another. They reached the ladder. Climb. Daniel ordered. Emily went first, pulling Sophie with her. Lena followed. Daniel turned, covering them, his rifle barking in the night. More guards. Too many. Then, a roar. Not from a man. From the infected. The gunfire had drawn them. Beyond the gates, a horde was approaching. Panic spread through the compound as the dead smashed against the walls, their guttural cries echoing. The guards turned their attention to the new threat. Daniel took the chance, he climbed. Reaching the top, he helped Lena up just as the first undead broke through the gates. Chaos exploded below. Gunfire. Screams. Flesh being torn apart. The perfect distraction. They dashed across the rooftop, leaping onto the adjacent building. The city stretched before them, broken, deadly, but free. Daniel turned back. The compound was falling. The same way the world had. Emily exhaled shakily. We made it. Daniel nodded. For now. He glanced at Lena and Sophie. They were safe. And for the first time in a long time, there was hope. End of Part 8.